Eva Bourceau was an art history student with a future as bright as the Toulouse sun. But by August 2015, her dreams weren't just fading, they were being chemically erased. For days, a heavy silence had settled over 38 Rue Merly. When Eva's mother finally stood before the apartment door, the air felt charged, expectant. But the moment the firefighters forced the lock, the atmosphere shifted. A thick, metallic stench surged onto the landing, a smell so heavy it felt almost unbreathable clinging to the back of their throats. The team moved through the cramped two-room apartment, following the rot into the bedroom. There, sitting in the center of the room, was a common plastic trunk. Strangely enough, it wasn't filled with clothes or books. What they found inside sent a physical shock through the city of Toulouse. Immersed in a bath of corrosive acid was Eva. She was unrecognizable, her features melting into the plastic container meant to be her tomb. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. As the investigation deepened, the image of the innocent student began to pivot. Behind the art history lectures lay a hidden descent into a world of quick cash and narcotics. What the world didn't realize was that Eva wasn't just a victim of a crime. She had become a silent character in a macabre staging orchestrated by her own executioners. She had wanted to live intensely and conquer the world in her own way. Instead, she remains a haunting reminder of a life stolen, a bright promise dissolved in the shadows of a broken destiny. Our story takes place today in Toulouse, a warm city in southwestern France. The Pink City, as it is nicknamed, is a place where life rhymes with sweetness and conviviality. Here, people speak with that singing southwestern accent, and in the bakeries they proudly order strange things in an ancient dialect. Chocolatines, apparently. This is also where thousands of students flock every year, attracted by the cultural excitement. In this city known for its dynamism, its big flow and ollie festivals, and its lively nights on the banks of the Garonne, Toulouse vibrates with life and lightness. We are in the heart of summer, Monday, August 3rd, 2015. It is nearly 9 p.m., but it is still too early to see the sunset, and the air has that particular scent of summer evenings. In the cobblestone streets, the terraces of bars and cafes are crowded. It is a time for celebration and carelessness, even though horror has just occurred. Sylvie is in her car, her hands gripped on the steering wheel, tightened by anxiety. She feels her heart drumming in her chest. She has felt this weight for days, this feeling that something is wrong, and since then the fear hasn't left her. So after work, she decided to leave the Lot region for Toulouse. It was in this city that Eva, her daughter, chose to settle just over a year ago. She moved into an attic apartment in the lively Arnaud Bernard district, near the Saint-Sernin Basilica. Since leaving the family home, Eva has regularly given news to her mother, almost every day, even though she is a free and independent girl, and even though they had a small argument the last time they spoke. Sylvie has had no news from her daughter for 10 days. 8, to be exact. No call, no message. And she knows it. This lack of contact is strange coming from Eva. So with a knot in her stomach and a heavy heart, Sylvie heads toward 38 Rue Merly. Of course, in this kind of situation, Eva's mother tries to reassure herself. Perhaps Eva went to a festival and will eventually send a short message. The problem is that in Toulouse, other people are worried. Eva's friends have no news of her, and her neighbors haven't seen her enter or leave the building either. In her building at 38 Rue Merly, there are 3 apartments. On the first floor, the neighbor is away on vacation at that time. On the second, 2 roommates share an apartment. And on the third and top floor is Eva's apartment. Recently, there has been a bad smell in the building. In the middle of August with the heat, maybe it's coming from the trash. It's not coming from the trash, sorry. Aline, the 18-year-old woman who lives right below Eva's apartment, told her roommate she heard what sounded like an argument a few days earlier. A few days after this event, the noise, the screams, a friend of Eva's comes to ring the bell at the building. A neighbor answers, and this friend introduces herself as Anaïs. She explains that she is worried. She hasn't had news of Eva for several days. She asks the neighbor if he noticed anything, but the neighbor replies no. For several days as well, there has been no noise in Eva's apartment, but he agrees to take Anaïs's number to notify her if he sees Eva again. It wasn't until later, on August 2nd, that the neighbor hears the front door open around 1 p.m. Footsteps go up the stairs, pass right in front of his place, then go beyond his apartment. Only one possible destination, Eva's apartment. Intrigued, the neighbor gets dressed and discreetly goes up to the 3rd floor in his socks. He finds himself in front of Eva's apartment door and senses that the smell permeating the building is stronger here. He knocks. No answer. He listens in case he hears someone on the other side. A breath, a movement, something, nothing, no noise. Yet, he is sure. Someone went up. Not knowing what to do, the neighbor tiptoes back down to his apartment and calls Anaïs, who had given him her phone number. Eva's friend, remember? Someone is at her place. I went to knock. There was no answer. I'm sure it's not her. Don't take me for an idiot. Something is wrong. It is at this point that Sylvie, Eva's mother, was subsequently contacted by her friends and decided to go to Toulouse herself. So when she finally arrives at 38 Rue Merlis this August 3rd, she rings the neighbor's bell, who opens up and lets her go up without question. Another friend of Eva's eventually joins them and decides to call the firefighters since no one has a spare set of keys to the apartment, and the smell coming from it is absolutely indescribable. The weight is unbearable even though the firefighters arrive quickly. After assessing the situation, they deploy the large ladder to access Eva's bedroom through the skylight. Sylvie remains below. A firefighter then goes onto the roof and tries to look through Eva's apartment skylight. But he realizes that a sheet of paper has been taped over the skylight on the inside so that no one can look into the apartment. Anyway, the firefighter still manages to force the skylight. He enters the unit and orders his colleagues to break down the door immediately. Then everything accelerates. Sylvie, the mother still below, hears everything that is happening. The crash of the door giving way, the firefighters entering her daughter's apartment. Confused noises, agitated voices. Then one of them shouts, "Oh boy, everyone down, call the cops." It is at this precise moment that everything shifts very quickly, too quickly. Sylvie understands. The ground gives way beneath her feet. She lacks air, a brutal and unbearable pain submerges her. Her daughter has just been discovered dead. She understood it well. Her grief echoes throughout the building. The firefighters take charge of Eva's mother, seat her in the truck, and leave the scene with her. While outside, the summer sun begins its decline. Sylvie's sun goes out. In Eva's room, a foul-smelling trunk has just been discovered, in which a body seems soaked in a strange liquid. The scene is indescribable. Sylvie then dials the number of Christophe, Eva's father, from whom she is separated. The moment he picks up, she tells him, "Eva is dead." The shock is immediate. Christophe, devastated by this statement, does not take the time to ask questions. Everything becomes a blur, almost automatic. Without further delay and without knowing more, he gets into his truck and takes the road toward Toulouse. It is 11 p.m. when Police Captain Fabrice Sens joins the public prosecutor of Toulouse, Francis Boyer. At the foot of the building, he organizes his team to begin the initial findings. When in the early morning, forensic pathologist Anthony Blanc arrives at 38 Rue Merlis, the criminal identification technicians are already meticulously at work, collecting every element that could potentially advance the investigation. Their work will be long and meticulous. 2 days are necessary to exploit everything. The technicians take 158 photos that will be added to the file and seize various objects likely to reveal clues about what happened in this apartment. The Blue Star developer shows bloodstains throughout the housing. For Fabrice Sens, it reveals a scene of extreme violence. The atmosphere in the apartment is heavy, charged with that acrid smell that leaves no doubt about the horror they have just discovered. Upon entering, the pathologist Anthony discovers a place in somewhat of a mess, even though certain elements like a bucket and a mop give the impression that someone has recently cleaned up. While waiting for the experts to finish their work in the bedroom, he observes the smallest details all around him. His gaze is quickly drawn to numerous trash bags. He counts 12. Then he also notices several jugs of hydrochloric acid. His mind seeks to reconstruct the elements that turned this place into a crime scene. Wanting to take a step toward the bedroom, Anthony Blanc, the pathologist, trips over an object. He leans over to observe and then sees a crowbar whose end is covered with a kind of putrefied flesh. Certainly the murder weapon. At the foot of the bed is a large plastic trunk. A deodorizing spray and an insecticide spray testify to the efforts made to mask the smell of putrefaction that has since spread throughout the entire apartment. Furthermore, before the arrival of help, the door between the living room and the bedroom was sealed with tape, and the trunk was also closed with tape. The killer or killers wanted to seal the apartment to prevent the smell from spreading too much so that the body would have time to decompose. Well, I'm not an expert, but they went to quite a bit of trouble. Generally, killers take the body, go bury it in the forest, and that's that. But as usual, you will see that we are not dealing with criminal geniuses. The forensic pathologist approaches the trunk to begin the examination. It is rather large, but for a body to fit inside, it had to be folded and compressed. Inside, there is a liquid whose origin he does not know at that moment, and in it bathes Eva's body, a point that will have its importance for the subsequent legal proceedings. Eva is found entirely naked in the trunk. Very quickly, he notices that parts of her body are missing. Shreds of flesh, bone. At first glance, It is a bit as if she had been struck with a machete. Perhaps to make her fit in the box, he tells himself. The state of degradation of the body is so significant that he barely dares to touch it. Every movement seems to risk making the body fall to pieces, yet he must continue to examine it to try to find what he is looking for, a distinctive sign to formally identify Eva. So the forensic pathologist leans in and observes every detail with care, trying to discern something identifiable through the decomposition, and finally, he sees it. A very small tattoo near the groin representing a bat. It is indeed Eva Bourceau who lies in this trunk. To be able to perform the autopsy, Anthony Blanc, the pathologist, requests that Eva's body remain in the trunk and be transported to the Forensic Institute. The problem is that Eva lives in a small building that has been divided into several apartments, and the common staircase is narrow. What I mean by that is that if it's Gégé who takes the trunk, slips on the stairs, and spills the entire contents of the trunk into the common areas of the building, it's catastrophic for the investigation. Faced with this delicate situation, the experts begin by taking samples from the surface of the stagnant liquid in the trunk. Then they proceed to drain it. There are 28 liters of acid. Once the liquid is removed, they take samples from the bottom of the trunk. However, transporting the body remains a challenge. The best option after reflection is to call a funeral home for the transfer to the medical legal service. Who better to transport with respect and care than a funeral service? It seems logical like that, except that generally, funeral homes are used to transporting people who are in clean coffins. I can't tell you the look on those guys' faces when they arrived at the apartment. The funeral home team is therefore called to transport the trunk in which Eva's body rests as well as possible. The commission team is of vital importance because if the trunk tips over and remains are scattered, we could forever lose traces that will certainly later allow us to understand what happened to Eva and identify the monsters who threw her into a trunk full of acid. The operation and transport go more or less well if you don't take into account the sight of horror and the smell. The trunk is removed from the apartment toward the autopsy at pathologist Anthony Blanc's. An investigation is also opened for intentional homicide. All the evidence is there. Eva's body, the trunk, the acid, the crowbar, the trash bags. Eva Bourceau has indeed been murdered. At the Forensic Institute, Anthony Blanc begins the autopsy of Eva's body. From the first minutes, he realizes that an arm has totally disappeared. He handles the body with precaution, noting the extent of the damage. The body is very damaged, the bones are brittle and almost turn to dust at the slightest contact. The same thing happens with the flesh. The acid has eaten away the skin, muscles, and bones. Despite the advanced degradation of the body, Anthony finds numerous lesions. Some reveal what happened before the acid took effect. On the right arm, he notices darker traces, hematomas. As a pathologist, it is not the first time he has seen this type of mark. This is what he calls defense wounds. When a person is attacked, they generally have the reflex to put their forearms in front of their face and against their chest to protect themselves. This is what we find on Eva's forearms. She tried to defend herself, but unfortunately did not succeed. The forensic pathologist also notes that the nose is broken. A large fracture testifies to a violent impact. And he also discovers 2 lesions on the skull. The first, located on the scalp, suggests a blow by a hard linear object. The second lesion is even more serious. A skull fracture located on the left side. The crowbar could be the cause. Unfortunately, the body is in such a state that it is impossible for him to verify certain hypotheses, notably that of a sexual crime. The acid makes any precise analysis impossible at that level. But the evidence he has collected, the wounds, the hematomas, the fractures, makes the violence of Eva's last moments obvious. But then, what happened inside this apartment? What is the scenario drafted by the forensic pathologist? Taha Rani Aloui, a 21-year-old young man, presents himself at the police station on Boulevard de l'Embouchure around 2 p.m. He is not alone. At his side is Flora, a close friend, and more if affinities past 11 p.m. Without beating around the bush, he announces that he has revelations to make concerning the murder of Eva Bourceau. The investigators, who don't quite know how to react, decide to place the young woman and the boy in custody. The duty lawyer, Maître Marie Rigol, who isn't there to mess around, is called. She is asked to come to the station to speak with the young man, who has a clean criminal record and seems ready to talk. When the lawyer finds herself facing Taha for the first time, she is struck by his appearance. He looks young, almost fragile, to the point that she wonders for a moment if he is a minor. He seems tired, his features are drawn as if he hasn't slept for days. Yet despite the gravity of the situation, Taha is very smiling, which seems out of step with being placed in custody. He begins to tell the story and explains that he has known Eva for about 6 months, that they were friends, and immediately defends himself against any violence toward her. He did her no harm, he seems sure of himself, and asserts that he was involved after the fact when a friend contacted him to ask for help. But he knows who the killer is, and that's why he's here. He identifies him as being his little brother, a certain Zakaria Banouni, also called Zach. Taha continues his narrative, and the investigators listen attentively. He reveals that Eva had a drug debt of 6,000 euros to a certain Guillaume, nicknamed the Chinese. It was the latter who ordered Eva's murder and tasked Zakaria with settling this debt. After his crime, Zach panicked and called Taha, saying, "Man, I've really done something big. I killed Eva." Oh boy, wait. Because here we get the impression that it will be very quickly resolved, and yet you will see that Eva's murder actually hides many other truths. Strange confessions. The details are chilling. Taha says that the two young men decided to make it look like she had run away. They began by emptying Eva's apartment, hence the many trash bags found on site. Some had already been thrown away before the firefighters intervened. Then Taha took things into his own hands to get his friend out of trouble. He claims to have found a solution to make the body disappear by taking inspiration from the series Breaking Bad, dissolving it in acid. In the first season of this absolutely incredible series that I watch every year, Walter White, a chemistry teacher turned methamphetamine manufacturer, finds himself facing a similar problem, making a body disappear along with his associate Jesse Pinkman, a small-time dealer who was once his student. He plans to dissolve the corpse. For that, Walter asks Jesse to buy a large plastic tub and acid at a hardware store. After buying cheap acid in the nearest store, Taha and Zakaria try to reproduce this macabre plan using hydrochloric acid. This acid, although very corrosive to skin, eyes, and organic tissues, does not have the same properties as the one used in the series. It is not as powerful and does not guarantee total dissolution of the body. What they ignored or underestimated was that decomposition would be much slower than they had hoped, leaving tangible evidence on site. Taha tells investigators that after Eva's death, Zakaria and he returned to the apartment every day for a week. Their goal? To add hydrochloric acid to the trunk to try to accelerate the decomposition of the body. But despite their efforts, the process did not have the intended effect. A few days earlier, when the police had searched the apartment, they had found several empty jugs of hydrochloric acid scattered in the room, which seems to fit with Taha Rani Alawi's revelations. The investigators are therefore preparing to arrest 2 additional people. The judicial machine is set in motion. Zakaria Banouni is arrested on August 5th at 6:45 p.m. while leaving his summer job at the local recycling center. He is with his father, who came to take him home after his shift. They barely have time to pass the gate before cars from the Regional Judicial Police Service, SRPJ, pull up. Zakaria and his father don't have time to react. Zach knows it. This is not a routine check, but his father watches the scene without understanding. Police from the Research and Intervention Brigade get out of the vehicles and approach Zakaria. He offers no resistance, as if he knew this moment would come. For his father, it is a shock when the reason is explained to him. His son is under arrest for murder. After his arrest, Zakaria Banouni's custody begins in a heavy silence. While investigators actively continue their search to find the third individual, Guillaume, called the Chinese, Zakaria is already seated in the interrogation room. He is defended by Maitre Jonathan Baumstein. The observant lawyer focuses on his client. He sees a tall young man. Zakaria measures 1.95 meters, thin, weighing barely 70 kilos, a sallow complexion and bloodshot eyes. He looks like a broken man. Head resting between his hands, he remains motionless, forehead against the table. Zakaria suddenly raises his head slowly and says, "Yes, I'm the one who did it." He goes straight to the point. He admits to having participated in Eva's murder with Taha, and places all this horror within the context of drug trafficking. He says that Eva owed money to Guillaume, but speaks of about 1,000 euros and not 6,000. They had come to her place with the aim of scaring her and recovering this debt. He says he was seized with terror when Taha, armed with a crowbar, struck Eva several times. He concludes by saying, "We are crazy, Taha and I." What Zach ignores for the moment is that the one he calls his big brother, Taha, is accusing him of Eva's murder. So the two boys' versions differ at this point. The confusion only amplifies when Guillaume is in turn arrested and interrogated on the morning of Thursday, August 6th. Guillaume categorically denies the accusations that he ordered Eva Bourceau's murder. According to the description provided by Taha and Zakaria, Guillaume was depicted as a drug trafficker, important enough to have set up an entire network and dangerous enough to stop at nothing to recover what is owed to him. But this portrait of a tough guy doesn't seem to fit reality. This adopted child, who arrived from Vietnam at the age of 2, was for 3 years a student at ISG, the Higher European Management Institute. Although he did not pass his final year, Guillaume did not intend to give up his studies. He admits to his lawyer, however, that he did set up a small drug sales network. But far from being an unscrupulous drug lord casting a shadow over Pablo Escobar, he says he operated on a small scale away from prying eyes and far from the rough neighborhoods of Toulouse. His activity went through the darknet, and he sold his products to a few friends and acquaintances, including Taha and Eva, but he asserts that the young woman had no debt to him because she always paid in cash. According to him, they never had financial problems together, which is not the case for Taha, who paid him late and often stood him up. Guillaume, completely overwhelmed by events, does not see himself as a major trafficker. He is a small-timer, as his lawyer describes him, who played with fire without ever thinking it could turn against him or against Eva. But at this stage of the investigation, we understand nothing. I mean, Taha, Zakaria, Guillaume, they appear out of nowhere, they talk about Eva's murder, and we don't really have a motive. It's super vague. So the investigators will decide to focus on the one they think is the weakest to try to make him crack. Taha, already in a cell since the day before, prepares to face his second night behind bars. Physically and mentally exhausted, he is brought back to the interrogation room for a new series of questions, and he finally gives in and says, it's okay, fine. I'll tell you everything from the beginning." He repeats what he has already confided to investigators. Guillaume, alias the Chinese, asked him to recover 6,000 euros that Eva owed him. He accepted the request and spoke about it to Zakaria, who replied, "Yeah, for sure, we'll go there. We'll rob her and we'll kill her." The guy, he was going to Disney there. He then describes the moment of the crime to investigators. For the first time, a tired Taha places himself at the heart of the story. No longer as a mere witness, but as one of the main protagonists. He finally admits what he had hidden until then. Zakaria and he were together in Eva's apartment on that fateful day. He says that Zakaria had brass knuckles while he himself held the crowbar. And here is the very first scenario of our case. You will see that it may seem a bit messy, but I reassure you, we will have more information later, especially since for the moment we don't even really know who Taha and Zakaria are. As soon as Eva opens the door, Zakaria strikes first. Using the brass knuckles, he deals her violent blows to the face without giving her time to react. In shock, Eva tries to flee, but Zach follows her and continues hitting. At that moment, Eva turns to Taha, seeking his protection, but Zakaria does not intend to stop and gives her a final blow that completely stuns the young woman. Eva collapses at Taha's feet, but she doesn't speak. Doesn't say where the money is. Enraged, Zakaria decides to strangle her for 10 to 15 minutes, to be sure, I quote, of finishing her off. Taha does not remain totally inactive. He grabs a crowbar and deals 2 blows to Eva's skull. At the sound of the bones breaking, Taha begins to vomit. The scene he describes as chaotic, marked by violence and Eva's panic, but the scenario remains quite vague. He doesn't really go into details, and we still don't know why Eva is found naked in this trunk. This will have its importance for the future trial, and especially for specifying the real motive for the murder. On the evening of Friday, August 7th, 3 judicial inquiries are opened, each aimed at handling the multiple accusations brought against the protagonists of this drama. Finally, Guillaume is indicted by the investigating judge for complicity in murder, aggravated theft, and drug trafficking, and is incarcerated. As for Taha and Zakaria, they are indicted for murder, aggravated theft, and also drug trafficking, and are placed in detention. Regarding Flora, the young girl who had received Taha's confidences and accompanied him to the station, she is finally released under judicial supervision. Despite this new information, many questions remain unanswered. What really happened that Sunday, July 26th, when Zakaria and Taha stepped through the door of 38 Rue Merlis? What did they really have in mind? Was it a premeditated act or the tragic sequence of poor choices? Did they come simply to recover the money Eva apparently owed Guillaume? Or were they looking for something else, since Guillaume says this debt doesn't exist and he never ordered Eva's murder? Taha and Zakaria's real intentions and motivations remain vague, and shadows continue to loom over the investigation. Untangling truth from falsehood proves particularly difficult. Not only do the versions of events provided by Taha and Zakaria contradict each other, but the young men's profiles also add an additional layer of incomprehension. Nothing in their prior behavior or background seemed to destine them to be involved in such a brutal murder. And you will understand with this case that potential murderers lurk absolutely everywhere around you. Strange profiles. Zakaria Banouni was born in November 1996. He is the eldest of 4 children. Their mother, Latifa, is a childminder. Their father is an electrician. He married his wife when he was young, and they quickly started a family. They will do everything to keep their children away from bad neighborhoods and set up their nest in the wealthy Toulouse suburbs. Zacaria's abilities are seen as early as primary school. He stands out from the others and even skips the 4th grade. Like many children from immigrant parents and a modest background, academic success represents a means of getting ahead, making a place for oneself, and being considered equal to others. At Fenouillet Middle School, in the northern suburbs of Toulouse, his results are excellent and Zacharia begins to change. To blend in, he swaps his tracksuit and cap style for a clothing look better suited to the Toulouse elite he begins to rub shoulders with, shirts and corduroy pants. Thanks to his flawless record so far, he is welcomed into the highly reputable Lycée Pierre de Fermat in Toulouse. Here, the students are excellent and the baccalaureate pass rate is close to 100%. Zacharia very clearly has his place there, and further develops his interest in science and mathematics. He is described by his teachers as joyful, obedient, respectful, and thoughtful. During high school, the local press even speaks of him. In a photo, he is seen smiling, surrounded by his friends and his teacher. They participated together in the region's scientific Olympiads, and we even have a small video in which Zach presents his project. In his final year, Zacharia is spotted by the Dépêche du Midi Foundation, which awards a scholarship each year to 50 promising graduates from the region. At the time, no one would have imagined that a few years later the press would talk about him again, but for a completely different reason. Zacharia, done. Taha Rani Aloui, the first to turn himself in, was born on October 31st, 1993 in Casablanca, Morocco. He is the younger of 2 children. Since childhood, he has been told repeatedly that he is the best, that he is handsome and brilliant. Even as a small child, Taha gets bored quickly at school. He already knows how to read, write, and count long before the others. His intelligence and abilities distinguish him from other children without effort, and he shines naturally. He spends time reading his father's philosophy books. He is solitary, overprotected by his parents, and prefers to stay home to study. Cut off from the outside world, he enters the prestigious Lycée El Bilia in Casablanca very early, where he is perceived as the best in his class. His passion for mathematics already manifests at that time. During his lunch breaks, he amuses himself by solving preparatory class problems, while he is only in 10th grade. Taha eventually obtains a high honors mention on the baccalaureate in mathematical sciences and is accepted into an engineering school in Toulouse, where he moves in September 2013. He found a small studio right next door, and his parents send him about 1,000 euros per month. It is there that he meets Zacharia at an organized party. They roll a small joint and seal their friendship together. It is from there that they meet regularly, get to know each other, and finally become inseparable. So much so that Zacharia returns home to his parents less often and stays more and more at Taha's. It is there that his big brother, as he calls him, initiates him to mushrooms, LSD, speed, and MDMA. Taha at this time is failing academically. He can no longer manage and plunges completely into narcotics. He drags Zach with him, and the infernal spiral quickly sets in since the body becomes addicted very fast. It is Guillaume, the famous Chinese who will later be accused of having ordered the murder, who supplied them with products since they met at a party. Regarding Eva, we know that Zacharia is the first to meet her at the beginning of 2015 at the Prairie des Filtres Park. They get to know each other quite naturally with other young people over a joint during a party, organized by mutual friends. Then he introduces her to Taha when the latter joins him. Taha and Eva quickly become friends and source drugs from Guillaume. Taha is fascinated by Eva and talks about her constantly, but the relationship goes no further than simple friendship. Even though we know he had pushed a little bit to try to go out with Eva, who had politely rejected him. Friend zone. Hello. Taha and Zacharia begin selling drugs to finance their own consumption and even end up totally abandoning their studies. Zacharia plays the role of right-hand man, managing deliveries, money, and accounting for Taha. Their daily lives are entirely centered on drugs, to the point that Zacharia even forgets to eat. They sink together into a self-destructive spiral. In April 2015, Zacharia moves in with Taha, moving away from his family and further strengthening this toxic relationship. On her side, Eva tells friends she has refused Taha's advances and doesn't always seem comfortable in his presence. To summarize, Zacharia and Taha both come from loving families where education was a central pillar of their success. Brilliant in their studies, promised great careers, they embodied the excellence that many dream of but few achieve. On the surface, there is no obvious explanation for their crime. Perhaps one should then look a little more into Eva's life to try to find a motive. Even if the victim is never guilty, we can try to find clues in Eva's life to understand why Zacharia and Taha came to put her in a trunk with acid. because so far it still remains vague. Zachariah explains that he would have been tasked by Guillaume to get rid of Eva and recover a debt of 6,000 euros. Then afterward, he called Taha in a panic to come help him. Except Guillaume explains that this is completely false. He never ordered the murder of Eva, who didn't even owe him 6,000 euros. He finds himself there and doesn't even understand why. Eva is born on April 5th, 1992, in Toulouse. An only child, Eva asserts herself very early with a strong character. At the age of 3.5, her parents separate. She goes to live with her mother in the lot near Gordon. As her father, Christophe, is often traveling, she only sees him every 2 weeks. But during each of his visits, they spend a few days together to enjoy it. When her father meets Christine, her future stepmother, he proposes that she come more regularly to spend time at their home. With Christine's 4 children, who are older than Eva, she discovers the joys of having siblings. But the years pass, and Christine's children eventually leave the family nest. So Eva loses the desire to go to her father's. What she likes is the bustle. Eva is particularly pampered by her mother and grandmother. They do everything for her, and Eva tells them everything. She is so close to her mother that she refuses to see her start her life over. She stayed with Sylvie until she was 19. She is also very proud of her father, an adventurer who travels with Christine and sells jewelry at medieval markets and festivals. When Eva is 12, she accompanies them to Thailand for 2 months, where they go every winter to restock jewelry. She is in 6th grade and follows her courses by correspondence. Already, Eva distinguishes herself by her originality and resourcefulness. She also stands out with her radiant and sincere smile. In adolescence, she cultivates this difference by wearing long dresses against the trends of her age. It is an obsession for her not to be like the others. After getting her baccalaureate through the makeup session, Eva enrolls in the first year of Japanese at Mireille University in Toulouse. But after a trip to Japan financed by her parents, she fails her year. She then launches into a job as a door-to-door saleswoman where she excels but feels exploited when she does not receive the promised bonuses. In January 2015, she confides to her father from Thailand that she is partying too much and consuming drugs. Because of her excesses, a few friends distance themselves from her 3 months before her death. She celebrates her birthday alone and gets a bat tattoo to remember this day. In May 2015, Eva reveals to one of her friends that she has started dealing to finance her travels and explains to her father that she sells stuff, according to her. Eva wants neither to marry nor to have children. Since she was little, she has said that later she will be a businesswoman. All she wants is to live fully and conquer the world in her own way and by her own means. Monday, August 10th, 2015, is however already the time for goodbyes. All these dreamed adventures will never take place. It is a magnificent day. No clouds come to darken the sky. About 10 people have gathered in Cornbarrieux, on the outskirts of Toulouse. At the cemetery, Eva's loved ones come to pay her a final tribute. In an atmosphere heavy with sadness, a white rose in their hands, they stand in the shade of a majestic oak tree. Before them, Eva's light wood coffin rests, surrounded by a wall of photos where she appears radiant, surrounded by those she loves. You were lively, curious, dazzling, and full of joy. You loved the arts, culture. You wanted to touch the moon. You now join the stars. The words of her mother, Sylvie, struggle to contain her emotion. Eva is buried in the middle of the afternoon, leaving behind an immense void. And while Eva receives the last goodbyes from her family, the scenario of her murder is being written in the judicial archives. The night of horror. 2 months that Taha, Guillaume, and Zachariah have been sleeping behind bars. In September, they find themselves in the office of the investigating judge, who is still trying to understand who did what and for what real motive. Money, a murderous impulse, or perhaps a sexual motivation. Under pressure, and seeing any way that their scenario involving Guillaume and the 6,000 euro debt doesn't hold up at all, Taha and Zach admit that Guillaume never ordered Eva's murder. They recognize that they were the ones who had the idea for the burglary to make money, pay off their own drug debt, and buy even more products. It is a relief for Guillaume, who is then released in the following weeks. Taha explains that about 10 days before the tragedy, money was stolen from him during a rave party, an undeclared party organized in the middle of nature. To make money back, he looks for which clients have debts with the aim of burglarizing them. According to him, Guillaume tells him that Eva owes him 1,100 euros and that she's going to give it to him in a few days. Taha learns at that moment that Eva has cash at her home since she intends to pay back shortly. It seems logical to him. Well, even if honestly, his reasoning is a bit strange, it's not because you have a debt you intend to repay in the coming days that you already have the cash at home. Anyway, it seems weird to me. But for Taha, they must act before she repays Guillaume. He then begins to talk about burglarizing Eva's apartment to Zachariah. He begs him to help, Otherwise, he will have to return to Morocco to flee his debts, and it will be the end of their friendship. Zach then agrees to help Taha. But then, how can a simple burglary at the start end with Eva naked in a trunk filled with acid, her skull crushed? To untangle truth from falsehood, the investigating judge organizes a reconstruction that will take place a little more than a year after the facts. The co-accused return for the first time to the scene of the tragedy. Taha, head shaved, hands thrust into his jeans pockets, seems detached. At his side, Zachariah, shoulders slumped, seems overwhelmed. The reunion is frigid. They don't look at each other, don't exchange a word. Here's then the final scenario recorded by the justice system following the reconstruction. On the night of July 26th to 27th, 2015, Taha and Zachariah go to Eva's place. Their plan is simple: burglarize her, steal the drugs she bought from Guillaume while they're at it, and recover the money from her trafficking since Eva also resells on her side. Taha, cornered by his debts to Guillaume, must act. He has no choice, especially if he wants to be able to buy his next pills. They then arrive in front of the building. Eva is there. There is light at her window upstairs. This wasn't planned. They hope she will go out partying. So they leave, telling themselves they will come back later. In the meantime, they go to a kebab master to eat a delicious salad tomato onion misdeed. They imagine that in the meantime, Eva has probably gone out. The boys have prepared a crowbar on them to force the apartment door, and brass knuckles they always have to defend themselves. But when they return, Eva is still there. No question of giving up. They agree to use the brass knuckles with the goal of knocking Eva out during the burglary. Taha and Zachariah then push open the door of the small building, take the stairs, and knock at Eva's apartment, who opens up. Well, nothing happens at all in the end. Zachariah and Taha enter the apartment. Neither of them dare to strike Eva. All three spend the night together. They settle around the coffee table, consume drugs, and watch documentaries in the living room. Everything seems strangely calm. Impossible to guess that originally they came to burglarize her. Except perhaps when Zach starts making head signals and winks at Taha, as if to say, "Oh, what are we doing?" But the night begins to get late. Eva is tired. She then asks them to leave so she can go to bed. It is about 6 a.m. The sun is already rising. Taha and Zachariah thank Eva and leave the apartment. They walk a few meters unrumerly. Their steps are hesitant. Should they leave or go back? They turn around. Zachariah grips the brass knuckles that Taha gave him in his pocket and says, "All right, let's do it. Let's go back." He rings the building door, which had slammed shut and locked. Taha, in a calm voice, says into the intercom, "Yeah, it's me. I forgot my keys." Eva opens up. They go up again. Zachariah goes up first. Taha follows closely. When she hears Zachariah coming up, Eva cracks open her door. She waits, exhausted. She just wants to go to sleep. Except that Zachariah rushes at her, brass knuckles in hand. Eva has the reflex to scream and receives a violent blow to the face. She screams again. She is thrown backward and tries to flee. Eva doesn't understand what is happening. Zachariah pursues her and continues, harder this time. Eva wants to defend herself and tries to grab a statuette. But Zach is faster. He strikes again. Eva collapses. Blood from her neck and nose streams over her face. She is on the ground, held down by Zachariah. Then the boys kneel next to her. They order her to shut up. Eva, terrified, tries to stifle her sobs so as not to make noise. Taha asks her, "Where's the money?" Eva, weakened, murmurs that she hid an envelope behind the armchair. Taha searches. He guts the foam armchair but finds nothing. Frustrated, he returns to her and without hesitation, he grabs the crowbar and strikes Eva in the head in a rage. The shock is brutal. A crack is heard. Zachariah jumps. Eva, for her part, no longer moves. Groans of agony are heard. Taha repeats his question as if nothing had happened. "Where did you hide it?" He searches again and finally finds what he was looking for behind the sofa. The air is heavy with silence while Eva agonizes. Taha sits down and counts the bills. Eva is suffocating. Zachariah hears her, but Taha is too busy. "Ah, man, come look. I think she's not breathing anymore." When he finished, Taha gets up and leans over her to listen to her heart. Eva died for 950 euros total. Later, we will learn from the forensic pathologists that if they had reacted and called for help, Eva could have survived these injuries. But instead of that, they leave the apartment, thoughts blurred, numbed by what they have just done. In the stairs, Taha vomited. Did all this really happen? Did they dream it? They return home, high and spent, unable to know if it was real or if it was a bad trip. The sun is now up. The boys try to sleep, but anxiety gnaws at them. They decide to return to the third floor of 38 Rue Merly. They ring, hoping Eva answers the intercom. But no, the door didn't slam this time. The building is open. They go up and see her body, still lying in her blood. Taha turns to Zakaria. Man, I think I put us in deep trouble. I'm going to get us out of it. They then throw away all the things stained by Eva's blood and take her phone. Their goal is to make it look like a voluntary departure. But there is a major problem. The body, after a while, Taha remembers the famous Breaking Bad scene when Walter and Jesse dissolve a body in acid. They think it could work, so they send Zach to buy 3 5-liter jugs of hydrochloric acid and a red trunk with a gray lid. They return to Eva's and begin to fold the body together. But it's not easy. The trunk is almost too small. After a long moment of effort, they nonetheless manage to do it. Eva is in the trunk. They pour the acid. But the liters purchased are not enough to fill the container, so they go back to buy 12 additional liters. This time it's good. Eva is soaking in the corrosive liquid. With the stolen money, Taha pays his back rent and repays part of his debts in the process. Every day, from the murder until the discovery. For a week, they return to the apartment to clean the blood and check the decomposition. But they realize that the acid is not concentrated enough, and it's working poorly, not fast enough. Taha places a black cloth over Eva because he can no longer stand to see her blue eyes. The smell is unbearable. Eva lives under the eaves in a small apartment with the summer heat. The air becomes unbreathable. They then move the trunk into the bedroom to try to contain the odor, but it spreads throughout the building. They try everything. Perfumes, insecticides, sealing doors, and windows with tape. Nothing works. The smell of death spreads everywhere. It rots. And the neighbors begin to complain. While they are returning once more to 38 Rue Merli, on this August 3rd, they spot the firefighters in the process of forcing entry into the housing. It's over. They read the press articles. Reality catches up with them. Their plan has failed. The nightmare for Eva's family, however, is only beginning. And yet, despite the horror of the facts I have just told you, Eva's family will live through a second ordeal. That of justice, since at the trial, Eva will be presented as a sort of junkie, a drug addict who finally should have suspected that it was going to end badly. A judicial disgrace. December 10th, 2018, marks the first day of 2 weeks of a difficult trial. The parties enter the room with different expectations. Taha and Zakaria's guilt is not in question. So for the judge and the jury, it is now a matter of defining the contours of each person's responsibility in order to define a fair sentence proportional to the role they played. Did one have the upper hand over the other? For the defense, the goal is to highlight all the potentially mitigating circumstances that could explain their descent into hell. The idea is to portray the accused as the victims of an infernal spiral, and to place the responsibility for their acts on the influence of drugs and series. What could have made them tip over? For Eva's family and friends, it's different again. They are there for the truth. They are there so that their pain is recognized. They are there not to let them tarnish her. Eva, they have nothing to gain in this trial since they have already lost everything. But do Taha and Zakaria even have awareness of what they took from them? Sylvie, Eva's mother, chooses not to come to the assize court. She entrusted a letter to Eva Bourceau, Eva's father, who stands at the witness stand to read it. His voice trembles slightly as he unfolds the paper. In this world that is no longer mine, I take refuge in dreams. She is so missed. Sometimes I think I see her silhouette in the crowd, in the streets, at a cafe terrace, a bus stop. Christophe, visibly moved, then confides his own thoughts. He has only one thing in mind, which is to join her. My loved ones tell me I'm too young. Now what do I have left? What do I have left? His voice breaks. Silence fills the room. In this trial, drugs appear as a mitigating factor for the co-accused, whereas when it comes to Eva, drugs become an aggravating factor. The first portrait painted of Eva is that of a drug addict, a junkie who parties, spends a lot of money, and has bad associations. Necessarily, something was going to happen to her one day. While her assassins are described as prodigies, young men with impressive faculties who had taken a few pills and made a little mistake after a descent into hell. They should have been helped. The little favorites should have gone to rehab. Nothing would have happened. They don't have the profile of bad guys. Despite all the testimonies, all the elements that were seen and reviewed during the trial and this HVF, it remains difficult to explain the horror that was committed on Eva and her body, even if the defense lawyers do their best to present our two madmen as little innocents who just made a teenage mistake. Except the line about they didn't realize what they were doing because of the drugs doesn't hold up, especially when one hears the testimony of Taha's girlfriend, Flora. Flora says that their relationship, light at first, took a darker turn over time. Taha was increasingly strange. He had unusual behavior, supposed to be schizophrenic and talking to himself in front of a mirror. One evening, July 28, 2015, just after Eva's murder, Taha goes to Flora's with Zakaria. During the evening, she remembers he had spoken to her about the series Breaking Bad, while laughing together as if nothing had happened. She, obviously, did not know at that moment that Eva was already dead. On the day after the discovery of the body, Taha goes to Flores, visibly upset. He makes a declaration of love to her, the best time to do it, just to ease the atmosphere, then lets out what he passes off as the truth at that moment. Zach and Guillaume killed Eva. He tells her he helped find a solution and that he fears Guillaume will kill her now that she knows. I didn't understand then why he told Flora, if she is now in mortal danger, but let's move on. Flora, disturbed by this revelation, tries to stay calm. She lets Taha sleep on her sofa, but unable to close an eye after consuming speed. She is invaded by anxiety. She knows she must act. In the early morning, she pushes Taha to accompany her to the police station, and she doesn't want to hear more details and hands him a paper so he can write what he wants to say. Taha takes the felt-tip pen and begins to write incoherent phrases, talking, for example, about Eva's magnificent eyes that were decomposing and smoking because of the acid. Flora tears the paper away, throws it in the trash, and accompanies him to the nearest police station, which will therefore set in motion the arrests of Zakaria, Taha, and Guillaume. We would later find out he was innocent. You understood that. After 2 intense weeks of trial, the Advocate General hits hard during his closing argument. He asks for 30 years in prison for Zakaria Banouni, and life for Taha Rani Aloui. In only 4 hours of deliberation, the court decides. On Friday, December 21st, 2018, the jury of the Toulouse Assize Court sentences Zakaria Banouni to 25 years of criminal imprisonment, and Taha Rani Aloui to 30 years. The one who at the beginning of the story claimed to have had only a secondary role was finally, according to the jurors, the leader. Neither of the two will appeal their conviction. The hypothesis of a sexual motive or even rape cannot be totally excluded. Eva was found naked in the trunk, and the degradation of her body did not allow for verification of this hypothesis. Impossible to know what her nudity was due to. Did they abuse her? Did the acid destroy the fabric? Did they remove her clothes hoping to accelerate the dissolution process? Taha and Zach never explained themselves on this, but we know that on the night of the murder, after Taha and Zach left before returning to commit the horror, Eva sends a text to a friend saying she was afraid when Taha showed up. Proof that she felt truly bad in his presence, but we will never truly know why, nor what Taha might have attempted before. After the trial, Christoph, Eva's father, will say, "Even the death penalty would not have sufficed for our grief. But well, I will never have compassion for them. Their parents, I can understand their misfortune, but it will never be at my level. And there it is, we'll have to keep going with it." The Assize Court of Haute-Garonne awarded 80,000 euros to each of Eva's parents, but on February 11th, 2021, they learned that the Victim Guarantee Fund refuses to pay the full compensation on the grounds that Eva contributed to her own damage. To be clear, let's translate it frankly, the Victim Compensation Fund considered that, while what happened to Eva was really not nice and people shouldn't do that sort of thing, she didn't exactly have a straight life, so she should have suspected that at one point or another, it was going to end badly. Therefore, they decide not to compensate Eva's family. It is absolutely repulsive. Meanwhile, Taha has validated his math degree, and Zach has taken up woodworking in prison. Eva Bourceau was judged during her trial, in which she was nonetheless the victim, as if she were also among the accused. We no longer know whether to be saddened by the wasted future of the guilty parties, rather than the one of which Eva was deprived. If you watch this case to the end, and feel free to also give me your opinion on the judicial treatment of this case in which Eva was presented as a decadent young woman who was bound to end up badly, while Taha and Zakaria, for their part, were young men who simply made a mistake because of their addiction, but who are deep down not bad boys.